What you're about to see isn't just rare photos. Each shot has a mind-blowing story that few people know about. Take this photo, for example.
Julie Bowen posed for this magazine shoot in '96, right as she was landing small roles on shows like ER. The photographer set her up with 2 mugs of beer on a chaise lounge for a playful vibe. It was one of her first big gigs before she scored Happy Gilmore later that year. The Raise the Titanic crew built a 55-foot-long replica of the ship in '80, weighing a hefty 10 tons for the big-budget film. They shot this scene off the Malta coast with a diver guiding the model to get the perfect angle. It was a massive effort, but the movie tanked at the box office despite all the hype. Nixon handed Khrushchev a Pepsi at a Moscow exhibit in '59, sparking a wild trade deal that got Pepsi into the Soviet Union. By '89, the Soviets paid with 17 old submarines, turning Pepsi into the world's 6th largest navy for a hot minute. It was a bizarre Cold War swap that had everyone scratching their heads. Metallica was fresh off their Ride the Lightning tour in '85 when this shot caught them outside their beat-up tour bus. They'd just played a sweaty gig in San Francisco, living off cheap burgers and adrenaline. That year, they were still a scrappy thrash band right before Master of Puppets blew them into the big leagues. Roald Dahl ran into Ernest Hemingway on a London street in '44, carrying RAF intel reports while Hemingway was there covering the war. The two swapped stories over a quick coffee, with Hemingway poking fun at Dahl's flying days. Dahl later said that chat pushed him to start writing seriously. Jamie Lee Curtis posed poolside in this sparkly swimsuit for a '78 magazine shoot, right after her breakout in Halloween. She'd just turned 20 and was still getting used to the Hollywood spotlight. That same year, she landed roles in 2 more horror flicks, cementing her as a scream queen. Reagan met Emperor Hirohito in Tokyo in '83 during a state visit to strengthen U.S.-Japan ties. They stood on that red carpet with the flags flying, while Nancy Reagan watched in her gray suit and fur hat. It was a big moment, coming just after Japan agreed to open its markets to American goods. Inger Nilsson, the Swedish star of Pippi Longstocking, waved to fans in Amsterdam in '72 during a promotional tour. She'd just wrapped filming the TV series, which was a massive hit across Europe. At 13, she was already a household name, but later said the fame was tougher than she expected. Yvonne Craig showed off her dancer's grace in this '60s poolside shoot, years before she became Batgirl on the Batman TV show. She'd trained with the ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, performing across the U.S. before trading ballet for Hollywood. That background gave her the moves to nail those action scenes as Batgirl in '67. This soldier tested an acoustic locator in the '30s, a clunky device meant to pick up the sound of enemy planes before radar took over. It was used during early air defense drills, with guys straining to hear through those giant dishes. By World War II, these things were already outdated, replaced by more advanced tech. Einstein took a stroll with physicists Yukawa, Wheeler, and Baba in '54 at a Princeton conference on nuclear physics. They were deep in debate about quantum theory, with Einstein still pushing against its ideas despite Yukawa's recent Nobel win. That walk marked a rare meeting of minds shaping modern science. Gloria Dwayne struck this bold pose for a '67 photo shoot, showing off her skills as a rising fitness model. She'd just started working with a big magazine, blending her dance background into her routines. That year, she caught the eye of Hollywood scouts looking for fresh faces. This elephant at the London Zoo in '58 was a star star attraction, drawing huge crowds during a post-war zoo revival. The zoo had just reopened its gates after years of repairs, and folks lined up to see the animals. That year, the elephant's handler made headlines for teaching it to paint with its trunk. Jerry Hall turned heads at a Paris club in '76, rocking a bold lace jumpsuit during a night out with fashion insiders. She was fresh off a Vogue cover and had just started dating Mick Jagger, making her the talk of the town. That party was at the famous Le Palace, where the '70s nightlife scene was electric. This laundry worker in the U.S. back in '30 was part of a bustling shop, ironing with an old-school flat iron heated on a stove. These shops were a lifeline during the Great Depression, keeping folks employed when jobs were scarce. Charlie Duke dropped this family photo on the moon during the Apollo 16 mission in '72, wanting to leave a personal mark. He snapped it in the Descartes Highlands, where they collected over 200 pounds of lunar rocks. That picture's still up there, faded by decades of cosmic radiation. These 22 refugees got their first glimpse of the Statue of Liberty in '46, arriving in New York on a packed ship. Many had lost everything in Europe and were starting fresh in the U.S. under a special resettlement program. That moment marked hope after years of war. Harlem streets buzzed on a Saturday night in '72, with folks stepping out in bold '70s fashion near a Coca-Cola luncheonette. That year, the neighborhood was a hotspot for music and culture, with jazz clubs and dance halls packed. It was the heart of NYC's Black Renaissance, alive with energy. This Model T tackled a steep San Francisco hill in November '22, with the driver braking hard to keep it from sliding. Back then, those early cars had weak brakes, making city hills a real gamble. One wrong move, and they'd be toast at the bottom. Mussolini took a ride with a lion cub in '31, using it as a propaganda stunt to show off his fearless image. The cub was a gift from a supporter, meant to symbolize strength for his regime. He paraded it around Rome, but the animal ended up in a zoo soon after. Gregory Peck took a break on the set of Beloved Infidel in '59, studying his script on a sandy beach. He played F. Scott Fitzgerald in this drama, filming scenes of the writer's rocky romance with a Hollywood columnist. The movie didn't hit big, but Peck's performance got some solid nods. Des Webb suited up as the Wampa for The Empire Strikes Back in '80, filming on a freezing set in Norway for the Hoth scenes. The bulky costume made it tough to move, and he could barely see through the mask during Luke's escape sequence. They later reshot most of his scenes with a puppet for better control. The Beach Boys hauled a surfboard on a California shore in the early '60s, right when Surfin' Safari was climbing the charts. They were all about that surf rock sound, but Brian Wilson hated the ocean and rarely surfed. That album kicked off their rise, landing them a spot on national TV by '63. Situwuka and Katkwachnia, two Tlingit folks, posed in their traditional gear for this 1912 portrait in Sitka, Alaska. They were part of a community fighting to preserve their culture during a time of heavy U.S. assimilation pressure. The photo was taken by a local studio, capturing their pride amidst big changes. HMS Vanguard rolled out in '46, Britain's last battleship, built to show naval power right after World War II. She was the biggest and fastest of her kind, but never saw combat since the war had just ended. Instead, she carried the royal family on a tour to South Africa in '47. Paris hosted a pretty legs contest in '50, with women lining up behind a curtain to show off their gams. A judge checked out each pair, picking winners for a beauty pageant that drew big crowds. It was a quirky slice of post-war fun, blending glamour with a bit of old-school charm. A French woman poured tea for a British soldier in Normandy in '44, right after the D-Day landing shook the region. She'd been hiding from the fighting, but stepped out to help the troops pushing back the Germans. This street scene in China from the 1920s shows a man being pulled in a rickshaw, a common sight in cities like Shanghai back then. Rickshaws were the main transport for the wealthy, while the pullers worked long hours for pennies. It was a tough gig, but it kept urban life moving. Workers battled rough terrain at the Panama Canal in the early 1900s, drilling through mountains to connect the Atlantic and Pacific. The Karmann factory in Germany was cranking out VW Beetles and Karmann Ghias in '69, with workers putting the final touches on the assembly line. That year, they hit a production peak, building over 120,000 cars for export to the U.S. alone. Those Beetles became a symbol of the era, flooding American roads. Punt guns like this monster were used for duck hunting around 1900, taking out up to 50 birds with one shot on a lake. Hunters mounted them on small boats, firing at flocks from close range. They were so deadly that most states banned them by the 1920s to save the waterfowl population. Lydia Litviak, a Soviet pilot, racked up 12 aerial kills by '43, still the record for a woman in combat. She flew over 60 missions before going down during the Battle of Kursk at just 21. Nicknamed the White Lily, Dolph Lundgren posed for this '80s shoot, showing off the physique that inspired Guts from Berserk. Back then, he was fresh off Rocky IV, bulking up for his role as Ivan Drago. Manga creator Kentaro Miura later said Lundgren's look shaped the iconic warrior's design. Madonna was 19 and studying dance at the University of Michigan in '76, posing here in her dorm. She was already dreaming big, but dropped out after 2 years to chase music in New York. That move paid off. By '83, her first album had the world hooked. Actresses dressed as mermaids took a break on the set of Peter Pan in '24, filming a silent fantasy off the California coast. They shot the lagoon scenes with a real pirate ship in the background, a big deal for a movie back then. It was the first film adaptation of the play, setting a high bar for Hollywood magic. Southwest Airlines had their stewardesses in hot pants and go-go boots back in the '70s, aiming to draw passengers with a flashy look. They were known for quick service and fun vibes, often handing out